thank you so much for being with us. A quick recap of this week. It began with Europe reeling from the results of the European parliamentary elections.
A political earthquake. That's how at least one European lawmaker described the unprecedented surge of far-right and anti-EU parties that swept to power this weekend.
Wait, did I hear that right? There was a surge of far-right parties in Europe. In terms of phrases you don't want to hear, that is right up there with "it's malignant" and "we're losing cabin pressure." Because, lest we forget, when Europe goes far right, they go far right through Belgium. And in case you think I might be exaggerating, take a look at Greece's Golden Dawn party.
The party campaigns with the slogan "Clear the Filth." The filth, it's code for African and Asian migrants.
We may do the Hitler salute, but at least our hands are clean.
Wait. Your hand cleanliness is not people's chief concern. If you're going to start a sentence with "we may do the Hitler salute, but," you have to end it with something better than that. We may do the Hitler salute, but that's only to show how tall a llama is. It's about this tall. From my chest, it's about this tall, just about there. These guys have seats in the European Parliament now. This is one of their flags. That's basically a jaunty swastika. If Hitler was alive, he'd sue them for trademark infringement. And you know he'd do that. He was a real Nazi about intellectual property. And the worst thing is, these guys won't be lonely in the European Parliament. They'll be joining Hungary's Jobbik party. Let's check in on one of their rallies.
The May Day festival for supporters of Jobbik, Hungary's ultra-far-right political party. Just 3 years ago, it exploded onto the political scene on an anti-Semitic, anti-Roma gypsy ticket. OK, a couple of things. A, that's terrifying. And B, quick side note, why do neo-Nazis always like metal? Is there anyone into both anti-Zionist conspiracy theories and smooth jazz? Hey there, we're Groove Step. We're here to denounce the mongrel races, but first, let's jam. This is a little quiet storm off our new album, Pure Bloodlines. Give it up for Neil Whiteman on drums. Real name. Can't make it up. In less alarming news this week, Ukraine chose a new leader, with millions of voters heading out to the ballot boxes. And just before you judge, you don't know the context of that clip. Maybe they were just overexcited or thought that was some kind of electoral piñata. So of the votes that weren't destroyed, who emerged victorious?
Ukrainians elected Petro Poroshenko as their next president. He is a pro-European billionaire who has been nicknamed the Chocolate King because of his candy business.
That's right. They've elected the owner of a chocolate factory. Ukraine is now in the hands of the Willy Wonka of Eastern Europe. Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure annihilation. Congratulations, Ukraine. You may have just gone from least whimsical to most whimsical country on earth. And finally, it was a big week for Afghanistan. As you probably heard, the American soldier who's been in the hands of the Taliban for nearly 5 years now is coming home. And what of all the other US troops still there? Well, over the last couple of years, the president has held firm with his planned deadline.
By 2014, this process of transition will be complete, and the Afghan people will be responsible for their own security. By the end of 2014, the Afghans will be fully responsible for the security of their country.
We will have them all out of there by 2014.
And this week, he announced a plan to almost completely stick to that plan for all but just under 10,000 troops.
President Obama has announced a new plan to end America's military involvement.
His plan calls for 9,800 troops to stay in Afghanistan after this year ends, and then about half of that by the end of 2015.
That's right. By December 2015, just under 5,000 troops. And the plan actually goes beyond that. By December 2016, it says we'll have 1,000 troops tops, but basically we're out. Not like out, but, you know, pretty much out. And finally, by March 2017, 300 uniforms on mannequins, but no actual troops, except for 5 troops and 7,000 heavily armed Americans on tourist visas. Essentially, after 12 and a half years over there, it might just be fairer to say that America's current official policy is we are just about to leave Afghanistan and we always will be. And now, this.
And now, after resigning, Jay Carney tells one last pack of lies to the White House press room.
It's been an amazing experience, just so fulfilling. I've answered this question several times now, but I'm happy to answer it again if you let me answer it. Come on, Ed. John, I get it. Ed, again, go look at the facts. John, could I finish? Every day in here with you has been a privilege. And hold on, John.
Is it pay a ransom as a metaphor?
Guys, it's an important interaction that takes place here. The president did not communicate with Jay-Z. I decided the time had come to shave. So, and no matter how tough the briefing is, I walk out of here having been glad to stand here. I gotta run. John, I give up. James, I think we're done here. Thanks.
Moving on. Our top story tonight concerns the internet, aka the electronic cat database. But first, let's take just a moment together and appreciate how amazing the internet is. You can use it to file your taxes, apply for jobs. You can go online right now and buy a case of coyote urine. Do you know how difficult it used to be to obtain coyote urine? You literally had to give a coyote Gatorade and just wait. It was a mess. The system was a mess. But if you've turned on the news lately, you may have heard some worrying references to the internet changing.
The Federal Communications Commission has agreed to move forward on a proposal that could change the way we use the internet. At risk, the basic principle of net neutrality.
Net neutrality.
Net neutrality.
Yes, net neutrality. The only 2 words that promise more boredom in the English language are featuring Sting. And hearing people talk about it is somehow even worse.
As anticipated, the notice proposes to ground the net neutrality rules in Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996.
Oh my God, that is the most boring thing I've ever seen. That is even boring by C-SPAN standards. I would rather read a book by Thomas Friedman than sit through that hearing. I would rather listen to a pair of dockers tell me about the weird dream it had. I would rather sit down with my niece and watch Caillou, a children's show about a bald Canadian child who lives a life devoid of any incident. Fuck you, Caillou! Grow some hair and leave the house. Find out what the world's about. Come on. But here's the thing. Net neutrality is actually hugely important. Essentially, it means that all data has to be treated equally, no matter who creates it. It's why the internet is a weirdly level playing field. And startups can supplant established brands. That's how Facebook supplanted MySpace, which supplanted Friendster, which supplanted actually having any friends. Do you remember physically having friends? It was awful. You couldn't tap people's faces to make them go away. The point is, the internet in its current form is not broken. And the FCC is currently taking steps to fix that.
The FCC is endorsing new rules that could clear the way for a 2-tier system.
The rules would open the door for the first time for internet providers like Comcast and Verizon to charge tech companies to send content to consumers more quickly. Netflix, for example, might pay a premium to ensure that its customers can stream movies more reliably at a cost a startup competitor might not be able to afford.
No, this cannot happen. How else is my startup streaming video service Netflix going to compete? It's going to be America's one-stop resource for videos of men getting hit in the nuts. You don't even know you want it yet, that's why it's brilliant. Ending net neutrality would allow big companies to buy their way into the fast lane, leaving everyone else in the slow lane, although telecom companies would prefer that you put it in a slightly different way.
When you say fast lane and slow lane, it's a good illustration, but what you really should be talking about is a fast lane for everybody and a hyperspeed lane for others.
Bullshit. If we let cable companies offer 2 speeds of service, they won't be Usain Bolt and Usain Bolt on a motorbike. They'll be Usain Bolt and Usain bolted to an anchor. And telecom companies will say they would never slow down a website speed in order to get more money out of them. But let me tell you a little story. Recently, Comcast was negotiating with Netflix. This graph shows Netflix download speeds on various providers. That black line plummeting downwards was their speed on Comcast during the negotiation. See if you can guess when Netflix agreed to Comcast demands. I'll give you a hint. It's right there. That has all the ingredients of a mob shakedown. Oh, Netflix, nice show about life in a ladies' prison. Such a shame if there was going to be something happen to your connection there. So frustrating that would be. And it's not just anti-corporate hippies who think that abandoning net neutrality is a bad idea.
The net neutrality movement is leery of big corporate players, but in this debate, it's on the same side as some of them.
Google, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, all signed on to this letter supporting net neutrality.
What's being proposed is so egregious, activists and corporations have been forced onto the same side. That's basically Lex Luthor knocking on Superman's apartment door and going, listen, I know we have our differences, but we have got to get rid of that arsehole in apartment 3B. He's too loud, Soup. He's just too loud. And you might wonder, well, look, if everyone is against this, how is it even possibly happening? Well, consider who would benefit from this change. Cable companies. Verizon wants a 2-tier system so badly, they sued the government to force the rule change that's currently being discussed. These companies have Washington in their pockets to a conveniently almost unbelievable degree.
Comcast has spent $18,810,000 in lobbying last year. That's more than any other company except for defense contractor Northrop Grumman.
So just to be clear, the ranking of who buys government influence is number 1, military-industrial complex, and number 2, the provider of lizard lick towing. Look, I could show you the troublingly cosy relationship between cable companies and Washington in any number of ways. I could show you the president golfing with the CEO of Comcast, or saying at a fundraiser at a cable executive's house that he'd been there so many times, the only thing I haven't done in this house is have Seder dinner. But perhaps the most succinct way is this.
The president has picked Tom Wheeler, a former top lobbyist for cable and wireless companies, to be the next chair of the Federal Communications Commission.
Yes. The guy who used to run the cable industry's lobbying arm is now running the agency tasked with regulating it. That is the equivalent of needing a babysitter and hiring a dingo. Thanks for stopping over. Just make sure they're in bed by 8. There's $20 on the table for kibble, so please don't eat my baby. With the fact that they are practically overseeing their own oversight, it is hardly surprising that cable companies are basically monopolies now. A federal study found that 96% of the population had access to 2 or fewer cable broadband providers. It's almost as if they've agreed to stay out of each other's way like drug cartels. But hold on, no, that's not fair. That's not fair. I mean, if hypothetically a cable company like Comcast were planning to merge with a company like, let's say, Time Warner, it's not like their CEO would sit down and mark out who had which turf, right?
Both in video and in broadband, we don't compete with Time Warner. You have to start with that very fundamental point. They're in New York, we're in Philadelphia, they're in LA, we're in San Francisco. You can't buy a Comcast in New York, you can't buy a Time Warner in Philadelphia. So there's no reduction in competition.
Exactly. You can't reduce competition when nobody is competing. You could not be describing a monopoly more clearly if you were wearing a metal top hat while driving a metal car after winning second prize in a beauty contest. And maybe it's because of their lack of competition that they get away with providing such shitty service. We pay more for our internet service than almost anybody else on Earth, and yet the download speeds we get lag behind Estonia. Estonia, a country where, from the looks of it, they still worry about Shrek attacks. Is it any wonder that in a massive recent customer satisfaction surveys, Comcast and Time Warner Cable came in dead last. And when you look at the companies that were scored better than them, people were basically saying, yes, Bank of America took my home. Yes, Taco Bell gave me diarrhea. And sure, GM tried to kill me. But Time Warner and Comcast are the worst. They are the worst. And I know the cable companies will say, oh, they support net neutrality protections, or they remain committed to the open internet, or just the tip. But let me remind you, they also say that they'll be at your house between 2 and 6 tomorrow afternoon. And does any part of you really expect them to fucking turn up? And yet, our government looks set to end net neutrality and let these companies run hog wild, and we're just going to let them. And you know why? It all comes back to this.
It seeks comment on ways to construe additional language in Section 706 and even suggests using Section 230B to broaden the scope of the Commission's usurped authority.
Oh, my God, how are you still so dull? And that's the problem. The cable companies have figured out the great truth of America. If you want to do something evil, put it inside something boring. Apple could put the entire text of Mein Kampf inside the iTunes user agreement, and you just go, agree. And that's why advocates should not be talking about protecting net neutrality. They shouldn't even use that phrase. They should call it preventing cable company fuckery, because that is what it is, and it might actually compel people to want to do something. And the interesting thing here is there might actually be something you can still do.
The FCC will be taking public comment for 120 days.
That's right. The FCC are literally inviting internet comments at this address. And at this point, and I can't believe I'm about to do this, I would like to address the internet commenters out there directly. Good evening, monsters. This may be the moment you've spent your whole lives training for. You have been out there ferociously commenting on dance videos of adorable 3-year-olds, saying things like, every child could dance like this little loser after 1 week of practice. Or you've been polluting Frozen's Let It Go with comments like, Ice Castle would give her hypothermia and she'd dead in an hour. Or, and I know you've done this one, commenting on video on this show saying, fuck this arsehole anchor, go suck your president's dick, you're just friends with the terrorists. Now, I don't know what any of that means, but I don't think it's a compliment. But this is the moment you were made for, commenters. Like Ralph Macchio, you've been honing your skills, waxing cars and painting fences. Well, guess what? Now it's time to do some fucking karate. For once in your life, we need you to channel that anger, that badly spelled bile that you normally reserve for unforgivable attacks on actresses you seem to think have put on weight, or politicians that you disagree with, or photos of your ex-girlfriend getting on with her life, or non-white actors being cast as fictional characters. And I'm talking to you, Ron Paul fan 2016, and you, One Direction forever, and I'm talking to you, One Direction sucks balls. We need you to get out there and for once in your lives, focus your indiscriminate rage in a useful direction. Seize your moments, my lovely trolls. Turn on caps lock and fly, my pretties. Fly! And now, this. Fly!
America. Everyone knows it's the greatest nation on earth, and our leaders are the greatest leaders on earth. But did you know there are other countries that are not America, and each of them has a leader of its very own? Let's take a moment to meet one in our ongoing series, Other Countries, Presidents of the United States. This week's leader, Tony Abbott, Prime Minister of Australia, the island nation famed for its bouncing kangaroos and bloomin' onions. Its current leader, hardline right-wing Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who rose to power promising to be pro-business and religiously anti-immigration. Literally, religiously anti-immigration.
And Jesus knew that there was a place for everything, and it is not necessarily everyone's place to come to Australia.
Exactly. Australia is for real Australians, like Tony Abbott, who was born in London, England. It's that kind of rhetorical consistency that's won him the admiration of his predecessors.
And if Tony Abbott ends up the Prime Minister of Australia, I mean, you've got to say, God help us. God help us.
Tributes in song.
Fuck you, Abbott. Fuck you, Abbott.
And the love of Australia's children.
My mummy calls him Tony Dum Dum because she thinks he is so, dumb.
What is it about Tony Dum Dum that's led to his current approval rating of 30%? Could it be that he's personally insulted everyone else in the country, from women...
The housewives of Australia need to understand as they do the ironing.
...to gays.
Homosexuality. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I probably feel a bit threatened.
To anyone remotely Irish.
This government's a bit like the Irishman, who lost £10 betting on the Grand National and then lost £20 on the action replay.
To elderly, cancer-ridden phone sex workers.
Tony Abbott has been filmed winking during a radio show.
I'm a 67-year-old pensioner, 3 chronic incurable medical conditions, 2 life-threatening, and I work on an adult sex line to make ends meet.
To incredibly this.
Tony Abbott has been caught out seemingly insulting a Queensland soldier killed in Afghanistan. After being told about the complications of the firefight, this is Mr. Abbott's reaction.
Sometimes shit does happen. Luckily, Tony Abbott is a master of words and can talk himself out of any situation.
Look, a soldier has died. And you shouldn't be trying to turn this into a subsequent media circus.
How's that turning into a media circus? Okay, well, tell me, what's the context? And if it's out of context, what is the context? You're not saying anything, Tony.
I've given you the response you deserve.
Yes, Tony Abbott knows one panicked, pants-shitting expression is worth 1,000 words. And what a way with words Tony Abbott has.
No one, however smart, however well-educated, however experienced, is the suppository of all wisdom.
But if anyone is the suppository of wisdom, surely it's Tony Abbott, a man who always knows exactly what to say or not to say, and who's won exactly as much respect from his constituents as he deserves.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Finally, there were lots of competitions this week, but if you were watching the NBA or the Stanley Cup playoffs, you might have missed the most entertaining contest of all.
Tonight, we go from 12 to 1 as we crown the 2014 Scripps National Spelling Bee champion.
That's right, the National Spelling Bee, the Hunger Games of the mind. It was filled with inspiring moments, and not just from the winners, but the fact that the losers all went out with incredible poise. Just look at this girl, graciously waving like royalty and shaking the hands of all her competitors before giving the greatest post-defeat interview ever.
What's next for you as you take on the next chapter?
I'm gonna go home, take 24 hours, and watch every horror movie on which I can get my hands.
I love this girl. On which I can get my hands. Even in her darkest moments, she cannot bring herself to end a sentence with a preposition. I would love to see an athlete lose with that kind of grace. Have a quarterback walk off the field saying, well, yes, they beat me, but in the next game, out is the direction in which they should be watching. I bid you good day. I bid you good day, gentlemen. Inevitably, most of the children ended up making mistakes, although, to their credit, none made as big a mistake as one of the officials did.
Feijoada.
May I have the sentence, please?
Tabitha discovered that while her milkshake brought all the boys to the yard... Oh, boy. Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong sentence.
Sorry, the correct sentence is, Kurt enjoyed a dish of feijoada and bitter greens, hard like a rock. When you make that pussy pop, pop that pussy. So... But the kids persevered through that inexplicable moment, leading to an uplifting, historic finish.
13-year-old Anson Sujou and 14-year-old Shriram Hathwar claimed a rare dual victory at the nation's largest spelling bee. The face-off ended in a tie after judges exhausted the word list.
You know what? After a week of terrible stories, military crackdown in Thailand, VA scandal, Greek neo-Nazis, it was truly heartwarming to see two children celebrating in a cloud of confetti. And watch how long it took for CNN anchor Chris Cuomo to ruin it.
It feels pretty good because not only do I get the victory, but I get to share it with someone else, so it means a lot to me.
Between the two of you, you're going to have to figure out a way to decide who's better. Is there any kind of other competition that you're thinking up, like where you kind of meet in an alley or at some predetermined pizzeria and you just have it out just for your own sake, mano a mano, at some point?
Well, I think that we're both pretty satisfied with our performances yesterday, so I don't think that that's quite necessary.
Hey, yes. Chris Cuomo, I've got a question. What the fuck is wrong with you? Who goes to a spelling bee and when there's a tie has the instinct, finish him? You know, there's a word for Chris Cuomo, but I don't know how to spell it. Kids, would you mind helping me?
A.
Yes.
S.
Good.
S.
Go on.
H-O-L-E.
Correct. That's correct. That's exactly what Chris Cuomo is. You are all winners.